Hey Melissa, how are you tonight?
Hi, Erin. Great.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm pretty thrilled. I'm on this COVID wastage list, and if they have extra shots, instead of throwing it away, they want to get it in an arm. So just before this, I was out getting my COVID shot, which is almost exactly 1 year after Colorado shut down, almost to the day. What were
Oh,
you up to like this time last year?
oh my goodness. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm sure a lot
Yeah,
of people are actually. This
yeah.
is a milestone, and I think one that at the time we didn't think that we would get to. Like, I don't think anyone thought a year from then that we would still be, kind of dealing with this. But we do have a pretty cool story. So a year ago today, I was in New York City and I was speaking at the Business Agility Conference. And just before we left, I was speaking with my former partner, Howard. Just before we left, I mean, there was definitely that should we or shouldn't we go moment. And in retrospect, we probably shouldn't have, but we didn't know that yet. We didn't know enough.
This
And
is you and Howard Sublet thinking
correct,
about, do we go to New York?
right.
Okay.
Um, But to be honest, the organizers of the Business Agility Conference, Evan Laborn and Sidki, are
Okay.
friends. And, we didn't want to bail on them as speakers. And again, we didn't know enough at that point. Like, we knew it was coming, we knew that it was not great, but it wasn't on the 10th, it wasn't as widely known. So, anyway, we go. And we got there the night before the conference. And I remember even being at dinner and sort of looking around and thinking to myself, like, something's off. Like, you could just feel it in the air. And like the news, I was in like a sports bar and like the news is on in the bar, um, starting to talk about this. And so the thing that stands out to me the most, though, was how Evan and Ahmed in particular, but really their entire team, were like the ultimate demonstration of agility. I mean, you have a conference, I think would have been around 400 people, but
Mhm.
already had kind of uh, tapered down to like 200, 250. And as someone who at the time also had a conference that I was responsible for, I felt so much sympathy and empathy for them just watching them navigate. Like, the night before there was a go no go, like, do we call it and just don't have the conference? But like, there were people who had flown internationally, like, it was just a big question.
Mhm.
And literally just watching them as a team take it iteratively, and like, it was almost hour by hour. And they were so compassionate, and so, immediately, of course, when they kicked off the conference, they just said, we know things are weird, like, super transparent, we know things are weird. For the moment, we're going to continue. Um, they set up live streaming in like a 24-hour period
Oh
so
wow.
that they had speakers live streaming and guests able to live stream that couldn't make it.
Mhm.
And then they were, if you need to leave, of course, we'll give you a refund. Please feel it at ease to leave. And I just remember, like, one, being glad that I was kind of glad we were there, like, just to be someone who got it and like someone to kind of stand with them as a friend and be like, okay, we're gonna make it. Um, I will say
Mhm.
we kept in touch. There was not a single case of COVID out of that conference.
Mhm.
I remember emailing them 30 days later and being like, you made it,
Yeah.
you know? But it was just incredible. And then just the human elements of it all, the way that they handled it, but also even just the way the attendees handled it. You had a bunch of agilists in one place in the middle of a crisis. So if ever you're going to see that show through, that was the
Right.
time.
I guess.
So,
And I'm hearing also all sorts of themes: collaboration, meeting people's needs, trying to deliver value in a very uncertain period, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
And
that's where I
and you
was
pulled it
a
off,
year
or
ago.
they pulled it off?
They pulled it off. I mean, they completed the entire conference. It definitely, like, as time went on, it dwindled as people started catching flights and being able to get home. And trying to remember, I think we just went home on our normal flight, which by the way was on Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
Uh, which is
I
a little
remember it
bit like,
well.
ooh.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, they did a magnificent job. And again, I just look back on it as such a glorious demonstration of everything that we talk about in our space, you
yeah.
know? And I'm
Shall
sure
we
it didn't
say?
feel that way. Yes.
Go
Sure
ahead.
it didn't feel that way to them,
I'm
I'm
sure.
sure it was super painful, but it was
Yeah.
kind of beautiful to watch.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things like the sunk cost fallacy and optimism bias and some other things, I'm sure. That's just part of being a human being. But having friends and allies and other people that think about how to embrace change, inspect, adapt, must have helped them through that quite a bit.
I hope so. I hope that we were able, all of us were able to. I think we all tried to let them know that, like, they weren't going to make a wrong decision, right? Like,
Hmm.
they weren't going to fail because whatever decision they made with the information they had was going to be the right decision in that moment.
Sure.
And it was like, you know, I don't know if I would have recommended they change anything. Oh, there were gallons of hand sanitizer. I have to say that too.
That's
It was
good.
hilarious. And the
Just
like
run
elbow
your hands
bump
through it.
thing,
Yeah.
that was the first time I was introduced to the elbow bump. And so now I actually think of Evan and Ahmed every time I see. It's almost too, I mean, that is too close these days, but at the
I think you got the
time
toe
it was
kick now.
better. Right. But yeah,
That's
um,
hilarious.
it was pretty
So,
neat.
shall we say they were being agile?
Agile, resilient,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, embracing change. And I wouldn't say they were relishing it, but
No,
but
I'm
they were
sure.
embracing it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
funny. It's not always happy clappy, this collaboration and inspect, adapt, and keep failing forward, like make the best decision you can at the time. It's definitely not super fun, I'm sure. I'm surprised they could get the live stream going and everything else. But I was also joking a little because we were talking about agile. Is that a thing? Like, I guess you could be agile, but I don't know. What in business agility conference, right? So thinking more about agility than agile. How would you compare and contrast that?
ooh. Um, so hmm, to
Or
me, the work
mhm,
that I do
mhm,
is help people work better together using four values and 12 principles. And what, a lot of us feel like it has become, well, I don't want to be the like thousand people army that Brene Brown talks about. So I'll just say what I feel like that it has become is a thing. Like
mhm,
agile is a thing that you do, or it is a um, something that you plug and play. And I recently actually started a new job, and one of the things I talked about with them in the interview process was, if you're looking for me to come in and implement agile, you're not going to get that from me. That is not what I do. What I do is talk to people about principles and try to help them have a better life at work, and help them deliver value, and help them find fulfillment and joy in their work, through customer stories and through customer interaction in sprint reviews or what have you.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, it's probably been 5 years now that we've been talking about Agile being commoditized,
Sure.
and like this idea of being Agile over doing Agile. And
Mhm.
I have to admit that I think some days I have just come to it's not even a realization, like the acceptance that some of that we're not going to be able to undo, like on the whole, but we can try. and, and I think people welcome it when they hear what we're really talking about, because like who wants to be implemented upon? No one,
Correct.
right? No one wants to be implemented upon.
I could have used
So when I,
that. That's good.
right. So, when I start talking about like, let's talk about your flow of work,
Mhm.
let's talk about like, how do you know that the thing that you're working on is the most valuable thing that you can be working on? Or do you know that?
Yeah.
And often people just say no, because they don't know for sure.
Right.
And so then, stemming from those particular, whatever their problems are, or their the place that they want to start from. Oh, well, I have these principles. Let's see if some of these things will help. And maybe they won't, but there's definitely this like, I don't know, it's just it definitely has become something that I don't know that it was intended to become.
Mhm.
But we also have to meet people where they are. Like that's sometimes the first thing they've ever heard. So, I'm certainly not shaming the people who say it that way or, become interested that way, because
Sure.
I'm just happy they're interested so that we can have a
Yeah.
conversation.
Even if
So,
that interest is, wait a minute, this isn't going to work, right?
right.
At least they're thinking about it and what they're doing and maybe making those comparisons. I'm really curious. You're talking about some things that maybe we can't get away from. I was also hearing around the four values, 12 principles, and highlighting that. And people have different principles. And is that something you also look at? Because you were also saying maybe some of this doesn't work. And so I'm wondering why not?
Sure. I do like to start with an organization's core values if that is something that they have or that they talk about a lot. Because you can tell a lot from that if their core values are active, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like if they're
Oh, yeah.
not just paper on the wall. If their
Touted.
core values are
Right.
active, then it's pretty easy to see at least what they aspirationally want to be.
Okay.
Um, so just for an example, little humble brag, or not humble brag, but company brag. Um, the organization that I recently joined, I mean, one of their values is transparency, and another one is ideas over hierarchy. And so, pretty quickly I was like,
Say more.
this sounds promising.
Right?
Um, and, that was reflected in the conversations that we had prior to me joining. So, to your second question about, you know, does it sometimes not work? And if so, why not? I mean, we have to accept that sometimes it doesn't work. That doesn't mean that the principles are invalid, but we all know there's a huge cultural component to this, and there's also just how far an organization is from the principles and how far they want to move.
Yeah.
Just us wanting them to move doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Um,
Don't
so
inflict
once,
help. I've learned that.
no, exactly. So, I think one of the best things that we can do if we're going into a new situation, whether it's a new full-time company or a client, is quickly make visible, here's what I'm about.
Hmm.
Here's what my movement is about. Is this aligned with where you are or where you want to go?
Hmm.
And I think the beauty of the values and principles is that they're pretty, I almost said explicit, but like they're pretty easy to take a look at and go, yeah, I'd like to get to self organization, or yeah, I'd like us to get to sustainable pace. And maybe they don't. There's, I hate, it makes me a little sad, but there are some people that say no, like that's not for us. And
Sure.
frankly, that's not for us to decide.
Right.
Other than you can decide your involvement if you're an agilist and you say, no, that's not the place for me.
That's true. We all get to make some decisions in this. It's not all deterministic and fated. I do wonder through this in my head. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this is tough because of people. And then I also think, but wait, we talk about it's not a people problem, it's a systemic problem. Is it both? Is it all problems are people problems because of the system? I don't know. How do we parse through that?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I would tend to lean toward the system, but also people's ability to see the system. So, it individual people make choices based on the system that they're in, but they
Mhm.
can't always see the system. They actually don't always know that the system is sort of causing them to see things a certain way, therefore to make a decision. And I'm gonna be a little cheesy and use as an example Meghan and Harry, who were
Oh,
Prince
yes.
Harry and Meghan, who were
Scandalous.
recently on Oprah.
Yeah.
But there was something about that interview that was so interesting because, he's basically talking about he was in a system that he could not see.
Hmm.
And he didn't see it until Meghan, until, he had a girlfriend and then a wife who was outside of the system. And when she came into the system and I'm sure began to ask him questions or say things, or he just watched what she experienced, that changed his perception and he actually began to see the system. And I thought, like, who thought that in an Oprah interview with the royal family that you would like see some agile corollary? But um
I see it everywhere.
right.
It's unsurprising
But
to me.
but it was really interesting to me. I mean, because that applies in a work context, that applies if we're talking about, anti-racism and anti-sexism, like all of those things. Like I am a victim of a system that I can't see too,
Yeah.
and the best that we can do is do the work to see the system that we're in and make the best choices based on that. And that's work and home and
Hmm.
society, whatever it is. Um, so yeah,
I
Harry
get you.
helped me think about agile stuff.
I think we have a title here for this episode. So I appreciate that. And it makes me think about our perception as well. Here Harry is throughout life. It's like the fish doesn't know it's in the water in that medium, and trying to figure that out, and all the perception, the awareness. It seems to always come back to some of these core principles too, of awareness and everybody trying to do their best in the system at hand. Gosh, getting to know that system, that's rough. And I don't know. I think these days a lot about bias. I know I have them. That's about, as I become aware, I realize, oh, I'm stumbling in another one. And maybe that helps clear up what is this system?
Yeah. I mean, one step at a time,
Yeah, right?
you know.
Yeah. Which step, though? How, what do you do to help people to see holistically and figure out what's going on systematically?
Hmm. It really depends. I hate to like use the
Oh,
consultant
what?
answer, it really depends, but um I think it can really depend on your relationship with that person and, your ability to ask them questions that help them see it for themselves. Like recognizing that you cannot make someone else see anything ever. You can't make them see it, but
Sure.
you can, you know, look for ways to invite them to see it themselves through questions, through sometimes analogies. Um, I'm definitely using the hairy one now.
Same
And
here. Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. Thanks again.
um, but
Can implement
yeah.
on people, and Harry helped me see. This is great.
Now Harry has his next Netflix special,
Oh,
How
that's
I
true.
Helped the Agilists.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, to me, what you just asked, like, how do you help people see the system? That's the whole job. It's the whole job. If you are an Agilist, if you are a Scrum Master or a coach, or both, um, like the job is to, help yourself see the system
Yes.
and then help other people see it and make their own choices about what they do with what they see. It's
Mhm.
the Scrum not being the only Agile framework, but Scrum doesn't solve your problems. People do. It just shows them to you. Shout
Yeah.
out Ron Jeffries. There's your
Yeah.
credit.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess it's. I feel like I gave you a vague answer, but I mean, that's basically like trying to describe our career in just a few sentences because like that's the job.
Hey, we've got an hour. How long, how long does it need to take? But I think that's maybe some of the power of open-ended, non-loaded questions is not only maybe you're you opening that invitation up to others, yourself as well, and
Yep.
even formulating the question you're cogitating.
Yep. And it's also about just making things visible. So I'm
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just thinking like I'm in my new gig and we're trying to strike this balance. We certainly don't want teams to feel surveilled, but
I know.
there's a
That's
certain amount of
one-way transparency, right? Surveillance when
exactly.
you're only looking in.
Yes. So I've been talking about omni-directional visibility.
Yeah. Ooh, gosh,
Um,
that's fancy.
I know. But we need visibility so that we can start to, that's one element of seeing the system, right? It's like,
Hmm.
what's our progress toward the work? Doesn't mean the work can't change when we have new information, but, how are we doing in trying to achieve whatever that goal is or whatnot?
Hmm.
I have mixed feelings about things like velocity because it can be weaponized. Um,
Absolutely. Dealing with
but
that
it
right now.
ooh, but if it's useful to the team, if it helps
Hmm.
them understand that like, hey, we notice a dip during certain times. Like when we have an all hands, we see a dip for 3 days. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a real scenario, but
At least a
you know,
day, usually.
right?
For sure. Yeah.
So, just I mean, that's one part of making that system visible.
Hmm.
So
Well, you're making me think as I grab my water of facets. Like I can see some bubbles, but no, I can't. All these different, as we get more transparent, maybe on the system, there's all these different facets and angles and opacity and refraction, I guess, based on how you're looking at it. And that, what was it? Please say that again.
um, omnidirectional visibility.
Wow.
Um, and I'll describe that. What I mean by that is that, if let's say a leadership team is looking for more visibility into the team,
Mhm.
we'll just use a single team for the moment. the team needs to understand that how that is going to help them do their work, right? Because often getting that kind of visibility in itself takes work. Like someone's got to help, make that visible.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that comes to mind for me is leadership can't easily make decisions like headcount if they don't know how well we're doing with the headcount that we have, and it's not a judgment on individual people,
Hmm.
but it makes it a lot easier to make an argument that we really do need to hire another developer or, whatever it might be. If you can say, hey, we're tracking the best that we possibly can, like, with sustainable pace, then, you can see that, you can
Yeah.
see. But it's also things like, then how does leadership make those decisions? Like the omnidirectional part is that leadership, and I use this like so generally, but like leadership owes that kind of visibility back.
Hmm.
So here's how we make decisions on whether or not we need to hire more people, or here's how we make decisions on, um, what we set as our company objectives. When you have that kind of transparency that goes every which way, then you just have more agility. I mean, not agile, but you just have
Right.
more agility, because
Sure.
everyone's more aligned.
More empiricism,
Yes.
omnidirectional, maybe.
Omnidirectional empiricism. I love it.
Hey, we just leveled up our vocab a little bit there.
Yes.
Excellent. Uh, you want to say more about your new gig? I have so many questions in this, like the executive team using Scrum and part of that omnidirectional stuff. Do they have a
Mm.
review at the end of their sprint? Where where are you anyway? What is your new gig? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. So I am the vice president of business agility at Sauce Labs.
Mhm.
And minor plug, I'm just going to do it.
Do
Sauce
it.
Labs does testing automation in the cloud. And what was so exciting for me about this was that so many teams I know in my years of doing this needed exactly what Sauce offers.
Okay.
And so it's pretty cool because I mean, they're, I don't say catchphrase, but like part of their mission is digital confidence, which I just love that. Like
Digital confidence.
confidence. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so uh just under 400 people in the company, um 15ish engineering teams, and I'm a month in, so I won't even try to like actually describe the actual products.
You don't know
um
the system that well, I take it.
right. Oh,
Okay.
that is the worst. Okay, I'm gonna talk about that for just a second.
Go for it.
I hate being the new person so much.
Really?
I am so contextual and am so I so rely on relationships. And
Mhm.
while yes, I love creating and forging new relationships, like there's the human part of me that wants to fast forward to 6 months from now, that I see the system, at least 6 months worth of the system.
Mhm.
So this has been a challenge to my serenity as I try to come to grips with, a 400-person company. This isn't, 50 people.
Mhm.
Um, I can't comment a whole lot on their agility just yet for that reason. Um,
Fair
but I
enough.
can tell you that their core values are so aligned,
Great.
and that everyone I've met so far has demonstrated those values actively. And I have an awesome partner in the people and culture VP. Like we
Oh,
kind of hit it off right away. So that was cool.
helpful.
Very. Um, and yeah, so it's interesting to kind of start over.
Mhm.
And I say that actually, so the engineering teams are all, I'm not the first one in this role. There was a director of Agile prior.
Okay.
And so, I mean, our teams are all running Scrum or Kanban or Scrumban or you know, some lovely organic amalgamation of all of them, which I love. Like, this isn't, we
I
don't
do
have to
too.
fit into the cookie cutter of
Yeah.
anything.
You start seeing the personality, I think, of teams that way when they're really owning, operating their own processes, methods, etc. And that's
Yeah.
always neat. Maybe that helps you feel a little bit more in as you understand how different teams operate. I don't know.
Yeah,
Trying to find that
definitely.
silver lining in being new for you.
Thank you. Oh, I have a
Sure.
great group of Scrum Masters too. Um, so we have 7 Scrum Masters, so two teams per Scrum Master, which I'd love to have one per, but two's okay.
Yeah.
Um, and they're great. One thing that's very interesting is that they are so there is an office in Warsaw, there's one in Berlin, there's one in Vancouver. Of course, everyone is still pretty much remote working from home.
Mhm.
Um, but that creates a different challenge that I'm sure many teams out there deal with, which is that they're not just distributed, but they're, across multiple time zones. And so, um, that just presents a whole different group of challenges about things like chartering or
Yeah.
just anything where you want to get people together. But they manage it pretty well. um, so yeah, it's been great. I'm in the middle of my 5th week, so still figuring things out, but I've had a
I'm
ton
sure.
of support and a lot of eagerness and like I haven't figured out if this is the word I want, but like receptivity, the right word? Like, people at this organization are hungry for this kind of work. Like, not just for me to do this kind of work, but to do it with me. So
Oh,
that's,
nice.
that's not, what is the phrase? Like, I don't look that gift horse in the mouth. That's not
That's
always the
right.
case.
Yeah, true.
Um,
Sounds
so yeah.
compatible.
Ooh,
Compatible.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Soft Labs. Yeah,
Okay.
forgot what I was gonna say about that.
Well, I was wondering about your new gig and how you're seeing the system and what kind of questions. And you were talking about the maybe toughness of new and not liking that, compounded, of course, by probably how many people have you met in person so far in these 5 weeks? Zero. Yeah,
I've been right here in this little room for the
I see.
entire 5 weeks. We do have
Yeah.
a handful of people here in Colorado, so we have, I think most or all of them are in our sales area, but we've already chatted and, are planning a coffee when it's safe to do so. So that's
Yeah.
nice to know that it's coming.
Yeah. It's around the corner. I got my
Yes.
first,
Yeah.
second one here in 3 weeks. Yeah. Pretty excited by that. And there must be something in here around the virtual remote as you are getting that context and becoming more connected. I mean, you can tell people are receptive and willing and open, and there's that compatibility. Well, how did that all happen?
I have to say that this organization is spectacular about welcoming people.
Mhm.
Um, so, the usual, when I started, they sent out an email, and I was shocked because I think I got a dozen emails in the first 24 hours from people all over the company, like some of which probably have no idea what business agility is about or why it matters.
Mhm.
Um, but was like, "Hey, I'm Rick and I'm in Minneapolis," or whatever, just wanted to say welcome. Like it was really neat and surprising. Of course I expected my own team, my peers, you know, but
Mhm.
these were just like random people. And
Wow.
so it was a good reminder for myself. We are growing very fast, so I am far from the newest person, like
Oh, wow.
far from.
Oh,
And so even as I'm talking to you, it is a reminder to me that I need to be doing the same thing because it did matter to it did
right.
mean something to me in those first couple of days. Um,
Yeah,
it is,
I can relate for sure. I mean,
yeah.
I think about when we moved down here to Ridgeway, oh gosh, 6 years now ago, and people that would show up, ring the doorbell with a little gift basket, and welcome you to the neighborhood. And then when new people move in, to pay that forward or pay that on because it felt so good to get to know people a little.
I want to live in your neighborhood.
Come on down.
We're not far
Well,
from each other.
yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's pretty nice down here. Just don't tell anybody, even though we're
I think
live
you're gonna
streaming
have
this.
right. I think you're gonna have more snow than us this weekend, though, is my guess. So I
Yeah.
won't. I won't envy you by Saturday.
Oh, I see. Well, I love snow. So if you had more than we did, I'd be envious. But yeah, I'm thinking powder day. It's coming up.
Yeah. For those of you who are not in Denver, if you're watching, we are going to get a massive snowstorm Friday to Saturday, like 2 feet of snow.
Oh boy,
So I'm
that's
gonna have to.
that's nice.
I'm gonna have to get out
You
tomorrow, I
better
think.
get out of that room quick.
Yes. I have recently retaken up roller skating,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was something I did as a kid in a big way, like all the time.
Hmm.
I grew up in Alaska, so skating was like one of the only things you could do in the wintertime.
Sure.
Um, so yes, I'm gonna have to get out on the skates tomorrow before it gets ridiculously snowy and I can't get outside again for a
They have these
while.
things that slide on snow. They're kind of like skates.
So
You
I
could
do
try
that
those.
too. I do ski. I have to say though, I think I'm it's not lazy. It's like pandemic fatigue.
I
Because
bet.
frankly, like the idea of packing up all of our ski gear, I mean, we live pretty close to Denver, so it's like an hour and a half to get out
Mhm.
to any of the mountains.
Mhm.
Like the idea of doing that just makes me want to cry so far.
That is pretty far. Telluride's like 45 minutes away, and I have to really think about that
Right.
for sure. Yeah. What are you maybe relearning as you're obviously skating, as you're taking up skating? But are there other things? I always think about how my mind is changing when I'm learning something or relearning something. I'm doing that with horse riding right now. So, are you learning something about
Ooh.
yourself with all this?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, Definitely because when I grew up skating, it was always in a rink. I mean, obviously Alaska. So I actually never skated outdoors, never.
Okay.
And so the first thing that I had to learn actually, and this has just been since Christmas, this was my
Okay.
Christmas gift, was like there's a whole different set of gear for outside. Like I actually have like indoor wheels and
Yes.
outdoor wheels that you just
Gotcha.
kind of, you know, screw on and off.
Mhm.
Um, but definitely beginner's mind because here's this thing that I like on in a rink, I do so naturally. I mean, literally after 20 years, I can skate like I skated yesterday in a rink. But outside is an entirely different story. And
Rink outside, right? It's not all
exactly,
flat.
yes. And there's this whole set of skills that I just don't have yet. I actually had my husband video me the other day because one of the things I really don't have conquered is going down a hill
Okay.
because there's no hills in the skating rink.
No,
And so
you'd hope not.
hopefully not. So I had him video me because, like, I mean, I look ridiculous. I was like falling down, like trying
We'll
to
be
zig,
posting a link to this video.
right? You know how you zigzag in skiing when you first learn?
Yeah,
I actually like, so this is an interesting thing. Like, I applied that skill. I was like, well, in
right.
skiing, you zigzag to avoid kind of just bombing down the hill. And so, yeah, I do think there's something to learn there about something that you feel like you've done 100 times before, or in my case, who knows how many times, but in a different application is completely different, and you will remember certain skills that you can put to it.
Hmm.
And if I'm gonna like bring it back to working in an agile fashion, if you're if you're coaching in like sort of a consulting type of way where you're going into different organizations, you can't assume that you're going to have the same application time and time again, right? Now, these things are going to come back to you, these skills that you have and the questions you know to ask, but it's probably as different as skating in the rink and then bombing down the hill in front of your house.
That's funny.
Um,
Navigating different terrain, but having some sort of skill, muscle memory to rely on, keep you a little safer. And then also thinking about not only the context we've been talking about, but trying to see the system and having your husband video you so you have
mhm.
some empirical, I don't know, evidence to look at
Yep.
and think about how to maybe improve as you watch yourself. I don't know
Yeah,
about you. I always feel dorky. Like even looking at myself on this video, I'm like, what a dork. Who's that dork?
yes. It's funny that you say that because one of the things that I have found um, different is that outdoor skating is much more mentally taxing because
Hmm.
in a rink, you still have to pay attention to other people,
Yeah.
but you generally kind of like it's kind of like driving in a rink.
Yeah.
If you're driving, like that other car is there, but you're not like,
Right. What are they going to
that
do?
car might move.
Yeah.
But when you're outdoors on skates, like depending on your wheels, but like any little, wrong type of pebble or branch can trip you
Sure.
up. So there's like this mental taxation. And,
Wow.
I find it very interesting. Like I kind of have that right now. I think in my new, at Sauce Labs, because I came from, not that I was by any stretch of the imagination on autopilot at Scrum Alliance, but it was, 55 people. The system was fairly easy to see after a little while. And then you're just moving within the system,
Yeah.
but in a much larger organization, not to say it's largest, but, you know,
Yeah.
almost 400 people, like the system is moving faster and has much more complexity
Yeah.
than 50. And
Absolutely.
so there's that in seeing that
There's
system.
big time. Yeah. You make me think about when the pandemic hit, of course, all the in person work stopped, and I had to rely so much on the training, the 2 day Scrum Master, the 2 day product owner, the 2 day advanced. I mean, you talk about Groundhog Day or just going around and around and around in a rink because a lot of the coaching stuff stopped. Everybody's like, whoa, what's happening? Let's just take a minute. And now that coaching is coming back and it's like learning how to skate outside. It's so different. It's so much more complex. It's the environment. It's not a controlled environment like a class and
Yeah.
a workshop. It is the environment and a lot to navigate working with people like that. It's really fun.
I
Uh,
love that you're doing that, by the way. Like, I mean, no shade to the trainers who only train, but I think that there's so much value in doing both. I mean, you have more stories to bring back to the classroom
yes,
when you're in it every day,
I
or
know.
at least partially.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
kudos.
My stories are refreshed now in my
Yes.
classes for sure. I'm like, thank goodness I have a client. I can update all my stories.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I have a
Um,
question. We were talking
yeah.
about with Sauce Labs. You have a conference coming up?
Ooh, I do.
Yeah.
Or we do.
Mhm.
So yes, we have um, it's an annual conference. There might be two, but I think it's an annual conference um, called SauceCon, and it is testers and there's certainly things like product demos and things, but it's much more focused on like the community of testers and people who are interested in automated testing. And so I can only think of one of the speakers right now, which is Andrew Jones, who I've been following on Twitter for a very long time. So I'm very excited to see Andrew
Oh,
Jones
good.
at
New
SauceCon.
follower for me.
Um,
I'll follow
but
Andy.
yes, Andrew Jones. Yeah, she's pretty great. So April 20th through 22nd. We just uh, started registration last week, so there's still tickets. Obviously virtual. But I'm excited, and I get to do the keynote. And you'll laugh because we just talked about this. Um, the keynote is the truth about Agile, and there may or may not be elements of what we talked about earlier in the truth about Agile.
Oh, wow. Glad to help you maybe prototype or dry run some of that then.
Yes.
The truth about Agile and SauceCon, April 20 to 22nd. Now, unlike your skate video, we will actually put a link in the video for that. What would you like to say in conclusion? We've about made it through this 50 minutes, got a couple to go.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about people this week, knowing again that this is a milestone that we didn't think that we were going to cross. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of milestones along the way. But, everyone's tired. Like we're all tired. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. You got your first vaccination, you
Ooh,
know?
yeah,
And so the thing that I would conclude with has actually very little to do with working in an agile fashion, but rather like, let's take care of ourselves and take care of each other and get across the finish line. Wear your mask,
yes. Wash your
two
damn
of
hands.
them, wash your hands, get the vaccination as soon as
Yeah,
you're able, as soon as it's,
please.
your turn.
Then we can go
Um,
have coffee. You can come down here and ski with me
in person. My goodness.
in person.
Wear your
Yes.
mask so I can meet my coworkers that live in
There
the
you go.
area.
Yeah, you can go meet that guy in Wisconsin that welcomed you in and all that.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, yeah, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and like, let's see this thing out the door
all the
so
way
that we
through.
can see some sort of new normal, you know?
I like it. Thanks so much for your time tonight, Melissa.
Yes, it was a pleasure. Super fun.
Great. And we're done with that.